Good morning, you guys. Welcome back to Racket City Yardstead. So today we're going to use up a bunch more of my garden produce. I had a counter full of tomatoes here that have just been sitting here ripening. I also had some peppers, and so I thought this would be a great chance for us to make some shakshuka. If you're not familiar with shakshuka, it is a Northern African and Middle Eastern dish. It's like sauteed down tomatoes and onions, garlic, some herbs and seasonings. My cat has been missing me because I was gone for the better part of 3 days. So he's trying to get in to our business. But it's delicious. You saute all of these veggies down together: tomatoes, onions, garlic, peppers. You can add spicy peppers if you want. Also like cumin and paprika. And then after the veggies are all cooked down and nice and soft and kind of become a sauce, you make little wells in the sauce and you poach eggs in the sauce. Lots of people eat it with pita, some kind of toast. Today we are going to attempt to make a gluten-free flatbread, a gluten-free naan bread. So we'll see how that goes, but I wanted to do that with you guys because it's my first attempt. And if it's really easy, I want you guys to know that it's really easy. So I've already gone ahead and chopped all my vegetables up, and so we can get going on our shakshuka. All right, so the first thing I did, I added a little bit of oil. I'm using avocado oil. You could use olive oil, would be more traditional, just whatever oil you use. I have this on about a medium heat, medium low heat is probably, I'm going to go with like a 4 on my stove, but maybe like medium low. And we're going to add our onions. This is just about a medium sized onion. And then I have some pepper. My peppers were pretty small, so I have 2 of those, and then I did a little jalapeno. I also have garlic chopped up here, but we're going to wait to add that because you don't want your garlic to burn, and it tends to cook faster than onions do. So the goal here is just to saute these down, them to soften down and get kind of translucent, and then we can add other ingredients in. But while these are softening up, I am going to get going on making the naan bread dough. All right, you guys, let's get going on this naan bread. So I am going to use my food scale. I find in baking in general that I prefer to use a food scale, but also in gluten-free baking, everybody recommends it, that very precise weights is really important. So the first thing we need is whole psyllium husk. I don't know if I said that word right, but I need 10 grams of this. This is, if you're unfamiliar with gluten-free baking, this is one of the things that helps replace gluten and give your bread products more of the structure that they need. And then, tear that out. We need 180 grams of water, warm water. I personally find gluten-free baking to be pretty intimidating, and I think a lot of other people do too. And so that's why I just wanted to do this with you guys, like fresh for the first time, because if it turns out well and it's easy, then that could be an encouragement to everybody, right? That we can do this. Okay, so the next thing I need is oil. And we need, I'm having this recipe and it calls for 25 grams. So I need like 12 and a half grams. I'm going to go with 12 because mine doesn't give me half grams. So we'll see. Hopefully that works okay. And then, oh, I need a spoon. We need to add some Greek yogurt. I'm sure if you need to be dairy free completely, that you could use like a cashew yogurt in this, or whatever your preferred dairy-free is, but it needs to be like a thicker Greek style yogurt. So I need 37.5 grams of this. Not very much. That was too much. Here we go. To be honest, I don't bake a whole lot with things like yogurt, and so I'm used to pouring liquids in and you have a little bit more control over it. So now all of this just gets stirred together. And this psyllium husk, it is super absorbent. And so this is actually going to start turning into like a gel consistency. Let me show it to you right now. It's very liquidy, but after it sits for a few minutes, it'll start gelling up. Our onions and peppers have softened up really nicely. And so I am going to add our garlic in and let this cook for just a minute or two more. And then we can add our tomatoes. It already smells amazing. And it doesn't have any spices or anything added to it yet. While the psyllium husk is getting jelly-like and that garlic is cooking in, we are going to get our dry ingredients for our naan bread together. So I have brown rice flour here, and we need about 118 grams of this. Getting close. Got a little too much. Let me grab a utensil and remove that little bit of extra. There we go. Okay. We need 65 grams of tapioca starch. I love that when you bake with a scale, you have way less dishes. I need 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. And this recipe doesn't actually give you a weight on that. So I am just using a 1/2 teaspoon measure for this. Baking powder. And now I will tell you guys this, because I've talked about the fact that I need to be corn-free. This is one of the few places where my sensitivity is not so bad that I can't use regular baking powder occasionally, but I know that there are people who are fully allergic. This calls for I need about 3/4 teaspoon. And so I am just eyeballing this in my 1/2 teaspoon measure. I need a full 1/2 teaspoon and then about half of the 1/2 teaspoon. But I will link a recipe below for homemade baking powder that does not have corn in it if you can't have even a slight little bit of corn. Okay, next we need salt. Again, we need 1/2 teaspoon. 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we can get these ingredients all mixed up. Just gonna get these ingredients all mixed together. I like to use my Danish dough whisk, but you can use whatever kind of utensil you want. I'm just gonna double check my ingredients here again. Okay, got everything in there. So now let's take a second look at this. Do you see how gelled this has become? This is why you use this, because it helps mimic the structure of gluten in your bread. So now we just need to mix this mixture into our flour mixture. I use my dough whisk, but this might actually work better with a spatula. Because I have sensitive hands, I'm going to throw a glove on. If you don't, then you wouldn't need to do that, but we're going to mix it by hand now. We're looking to bring this dough all together. Oops. The original recipe calls for millet flour and not rice flour. But the author says you can substitute the brown rice flour and that it just might not be quite as puffy. So I'm going to be really interested to see how this comes out. I just didn't have millet flour, but it may be something I want to look into in the future. Oh, this is looking really nice, you guys. Really nice. It says it should be a springy dough, that it doesn't have to have a perfectly smooth surface, that you don't want there to be any clumps of anything in it. It's ready for the next step, but first I need to get our tomatoes added to our shakshuka. All right, so our garlic's had a couple of minutes to continue cooking there with the onions and peppers, and so now we're going to add our chopped up tomatoes. So I differ here a little bit than a lot of the recipes that I've seen out there. So many of the recipes call for using canned tomatoes. And I have canned tomatoes, but I'm not really interested in using them when I have a counter full of fresh tomatoes. So this may take a little longer to cook than some of the other recipes you will find out there, but I think it's worth it to use our fresh produce while it's fresh. So this is just going to cook down and we're going to let it get saucy. I am going to go ahead and add some paprika and some cumin. These are both pretty traditional spices in a shakshuka. And get that stirred in. I do want to add a little salt as well. A lot of people would add red pepper flakes at this point. I am not doing that because I added that little jalapeno. And so I think that'll probably give us plenty of kick. But if you like a little extra kick or you don't have the jalapeno, add some red pepper flake and it'll be delicious. I just want to get everything all mixed in here, and we will just let this sit here, come and stir it every once in a while, and let these tomatoes cook down and meld all of this into a lovely sauce. Okay, you guys, so I have the dough out here on my silicone mat and I've rolled it into a bowl, spread out a little flour, and we need to portion this into 4 equal pieces. I am kind of eyeballing this. I didn't want to set dough on my scale. So just eyeball. If they're not exactly perfect, it's not the end of the world. So this says we want to roll these out to be about 7 to 8 inches. And it says they need to be somewhere in between 1/4 inch and 1/8 of an inch thick. So my rolling pin, if you've watched other videos, you've seen me use this as like a sauerkraut pounder, but it came with thickness guides. And this one is 0.19 inches or 5 millimeters. And the directions actually gave me millimeter measurements. Oh, you know what? I need to flour my rolling pin too. It gave me millimeter measurements. And for the thickness, it said between that it needed to be between, oh man, it's sticky, which is pretty normal for gluten-free doughs, I find. Let's see if we can get it off my rolling pin, because sometimes if it's stuck to the rolling pin, it doesn't matter how well you flour, I find. Okay, but what was I saying? Oh, but it said the thickness should be between 4 and 6 millimeters. And this one is a 5 millimeter. So that's perfect. I think we're about there. I don't expect these to be perfectly shaped. I don't have that level of skill. Certainly not with gluten-free breads. So I'm just going to get the rest of these shaped. I did want to mention, for those of you who have actually watched my other videos, in I think it was my third video maybe, I talked about making sourdough, and that I like to make all kinds of things out of sourdough. And that's true. And then I haven't talked about sourdough again, because within a couple of weeks of making that video, I started reacting really badly to my sourdough. I was having histamine symptoms that are really common for me if something is bothering me. And I had to stop eating sourdough. And honestly, it's been pretty difficult, just kind of from a mental perspective, because I'd gotten really used to the convenience. I mean, obviously, we like to eat bread, right? But I'd gotten used to the convenience of being able to whip up a big batch of sourdough tortillas and keep them in my freezer and pull them out for quick meals, and it just made life easier, you know. And so I haven't really talked about that, just because it's been a bit of a frustration. But I just hadn't been eating bread products at all, because it's really hard to go from wheat to gluten-free, especially if you're buying store-bought gluten-free. This one's cracking me up, you guys. It kind of looks like an Easter egg. But let's see. Where can I put that? We'll move that one right over there. So if you have a regular stove, you would probably want to be preheating it right now. Because I have an induction cooktop, it is going to heat really fast for me once I'm ready to put these on the stove. There we go. 4 naans. They're all rolled out. They got prettier as they went. This one's a little extra wonky. And then my last couple are a bit prettier. But so these are ready to go in a skillet on the stove, and we'll see how they do. All right, you guys. So I am about to preheat my Kamal here. You could use a cast iron skillet. This thing's just all stained up, but it works perfectly. We're looking for it to be medium high-ish heat. I tend to find I need to go more towards medium on my stove, but everybody has to just figure out where their stove works. And then our directions say we want water to sizzle on our pan if you sprinkle it. So I'm just going to get my fingers damp and the water sizzles. And it says we want these to cook for about 1 to 2 minutes, and we're looking for them to get bubbly on top. So I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and we can keep an eye and see if it starts to get bubbly. Hey, we've hit 1 minute. I'm starting to see some bubbles happening. I don't know if they're really coming through on the camera, but like right here, it's definitely starting to get a little bubbly. I do want to take a peek at the bottom. Oh, they are getting brown. I am going to, because I see the bubbles, I'm going to flip it. Oh, that's beautiful. I did turn the temperature down a little bit because it was browning before we had a whole lot of bubbles. So I still have 3 more to experiment with, but it does look like it's puffing nicely. So I'm encouraged. Okay, so let's look at the other side. Oh, it did get deeply brown and charred. That is what it says it's supposed to look like. So, and it does feel puffy. While our naans are cooking, our shakshuka is looking delicious. So I'm going to give this a bit of a stir. And then I'm going to attempt to make our little wells to put our eggs in. I'm going to put a little sprinkle of salt on top of our eggs. They should take about 7 to 8 minutes to poach. And if you want to speed things up, you can pop a lid on. So this is my last naan, and I'm trying something a little bit different here. I turned the temperature down quite a bit because they didn't seem done in the middle to me. But I will show you all of them when they're done. Some of them got pretty charred, and so I'm going to see if we can get them to cook longer and not get quite as charred. So I'm nowhere in the range of medium high anymore. I've got the burner turned down to a 3 out of 10. All right, you guys, so we have our shakshuka and our gluten-free naan breads. So I did want to show you guys. This was actually the second one I did, and that was even with turning the temperature down a little bit. And it just obviously got much darker than you would want it to get. This was the third one, temperature turned down even more. This was the first one, and I did try it. I did not love the texture. I don't think it was cooked all the way through. So I actually turned the oven on and put them in there for a little while. And I am going to give it a try now with you guys and see if that helped on the texture. I spread some butter. Traditionally, you would put ghee on naan bread, and then a little bit of cilantro on it as well. Putting it in the oven helped a lot. So this was the last one. I turned the temperature all the way down to 3, like I told you. So it was more on medium low heat. And I cooked it for 3 minutes instead of 1 to 2 on the first side. And this is what that bottom side looked like. And it gave it plenty of time to get nice and fluffy. And then I flipped it over and cooked it about 2 minutes on the other side. So I am going to tear into this one and see if the texture is better cooking it at that low temperature. And this may just be an issue of my induction cooktop and how fast it heats and how strong it heats, that I may just need to cook these at a lower temperature. the texture on this last one where I turned it way down is much more like what I would have expected. So it did come out really good. I just think it's sort of like the pancake. You know, they say nobody eats the first pancake because you have to adjust the temperature and get it just right. I would encourage you guys, if you need gluten-free bread, try this recipe. I will put a link to it down in the description box. But yeah, just play around with your temperature if your first 1, 2, or even 3 don't come out right. And if they are not cooked all the way through in the middle because it doesn't come out quite right on those first couple, throw it in the oven for a few minutes and it will finish cooking and get a little bit less gummy. So I'm going to dish some of this up and give it a try. So I will tell you, trying to get my naan all cooked, I did cook my eggs a little longer than I would normally like. They're not fully hard boiled, but they are more solid in the middle. It'll still taste delicious. Yum. It looks so good, you guys. It's been a while since I made this because I normally only make it when we have a lot of tomatoes coming in from the garden. If you guys have a bounty of tomatoes and peppers, onions, cilantro coming in from your gardens, I hope this was helpful. I hope this is a recipe that if you've never heard of it before, you think, oh, I could make that, because it's delicious and it makes a really nice hearty breakfast or brunch item. You could eat it for dinner too. And these turned out really well and they were not difficult to make. So if you need a gluten-free flatbread item, definitely check out the recipe in the description. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I'm really glad you were here. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you next time. Bye.